Code Vein 2 is actually an allegory for Epstein Island. You got an island, you have monsters who eat babies roaming the island, and a temple with a bunch of kids inside it. What's Ghislaine Maxwell doing with those kids? We don't know. But but let's start at the beginning. The original Code Vein was released in 2019 and was one of my favorite Souls-likes to come out. I mean, there were like 4 decent ones at the time, so to get one with the anime aesthetic was unheard of. I mean, you had the self-insert protagonist, a soulless anime bitch who's there to be a slave for the main character, you had anime titty, you basically had all the tropes right there. So with the game's success, it was only natural that Bandai Namco would do jack shit with the IP for 7 years. 7 years later, they dropped Code Vein 2, a game that doesn't really continue the story of the original and fails to meet every expectation. This game is basically what Dark Souls 2 was to Dark Souls 1, the main difference being we're not getting Code Vein 3. To get you up to speed, you play as a Revenant Hunter. You basically hunt vampires. Except you don't really do that, you just fight these hollows or whatever. The game takes place in the same anime apocalypse setting that the first one had, except it's open world, and a common problem people had with the first one was that the game was too linear, which, fair enough. But now, my complaint is the game looks boring as shit and has too many cutscenes, which were added to make sure the player knew what to do in this vast, empty world. So the game is basically still linear if you ignore the crappy dungeons, and the fact that there's basically nothing interesting to do besides the main quest. To add to that, the game has a very slow start. It deliberately bombards you with cutscene after cutscene and then an entire tutorial area. I assume they do this to try and get you over the 2-hour refund limit on Steam, which honestly wouldn't work for me if the game didn't run like a piece of shit. So I had to return it and pick it up on a PlayStation. And those guys, they aren't giving refunds, that's for sure. You give them money and you're not getting that back. You're not getting that back. You could ask them for a refund on a free game and they tell you to kick bricks. So, was it worth it, taking that risk? No. You would think that after 7 years the developers would come into their own and lean into the anime aspect. Maybe made Code Vein into an arena fighter. That way when the game flopped they wouldn't have lost so much money. But instead of a safe flop, we got a soul slop. Bandai Namco doubled down on an open world game thinking that because From Software could do it, they could too. All while ignoring the fact that From Software is the king of the Souls genre, and Bandai Namco are just the peasants who publish their games. But let's assume you're like me. You ignored the red flags, you survived the tutorial, and now you're stuck with a digital game on your PlayStation and a hole in your wallet. What does the actual game feel like when you stop watching cutscenes and actually play the game? Well, it's a slight improvement if we're strictly talking about combat. And I say slight because there's some pretty nice changes, but there's some awful ones too. Like they made the game smoother, now it's less clunky. In exchange, now you have to decide between being able to block and being able to parry. They wanted to add these special weapons that you'll barely use, now you can't block. They could have added these weapons as a special that could have been accessed by pushing 2 buttons at the same time, but that was too much. They said that would have overloaded the game engine. Or, they could have put them in a second weapon slot. I have a level 10 gel. Apparently level 11 is when I get the second slot. I've been telling myself that for the last 6 levels. The gel is like a weapon you use to suck blood. This game's combat system relies on skills that you use during fights, but you can only use a couple before you run out of Ichor. So when you use it all up, you have to suck off the enemy mid-battle in order to refill the bar. That's pretty tough to do if you can't parry and get an opening. So the parry is basically a requirement for any half-decent player. I'll never understand how you can have hundreds of people work on a game and still have it look like shit. You're telling me not a single person had a creative vision? They all concurrently worked on this project for years and no one says the game looks like shit. They tested the game and walked through the barren wasteland and boring dungeons for years and said, well, I got no complaints, that was pretty fun. They probably didn't realize how boring it was till the last minute. That's why the motorcycle is so awful to drive. I'm willing to bet money they added that fucking bike the day before the game dropped. Remember how I said the original game had that soulless anime bitch? Well, this game has one too. And just like the first game, she lacks any personality and her only purpose is to provide exposition to the self-insert protagonist. If you swapped her out for a blow-up doll, I probably wouldn't notice. Since we're on the topic of characters, I'd like to talk about Jose. I saw the name Jose in a quest list and I was like, they have a fucking this game? Wow, that's so interesting. It's an anime girl. I was kind of expecting like some Mexican dude. What's next? Wheelchair Vampire Man is named Shaqueen. Or who knows, maybe she's not Mexican. Maybe she's Argentinian. Maybe she's wearing an SS uniform. And LARPs as a white nationalist on X, formerly known as Twitter. It's not really worth thinking too much about this, because it's pretty clear. I've already put more thought into her design than the developers did. What I mean is I've only shown her face thus far, because they made Jose, or Josie, a teenage girl in her underwear. You would think that making this character the leader of a post-apocalyptic village would give them a lot of options to express their creativity in the character design. Maybe giving her an outfit suited for a king, or a great military leader, as opposed to slapping some underwear on her and calling it a day. You know, I read some stuff about this game getting censored, and I kind of don't give a shit. Especially since the biggest problem with this game is that it's fucking boring. If your first concern isn't that the gameplay fucking sucks, and instead it's that the cartoon character doesn't have fat tits, then you're a fucking loser. You're too in the weeds. You're too far in your goon cave. Needless to say, the game was censored and yet they still couldn't bear to dress the teenage girl. Maybe this game really was made on the island. Maybe my thumbnail wasn't tongue-in-cheek. Maybe they kept her design because this redditor said it was cool. If this is cool, I don't know what to fucking tell you. You know what I look for in character design? Sick armor and a big sword. None of that pedo shit. You want to add characters with big titties? Alright. Well, we can't be having this. The game was already trash. You can't have a shit game and also be pedo bait. It's one or the other. You can't have both. R. Kelly could sing and dance. Epstein and EDP are funny to joke about. What the fuck does Code Vein 2 have?